Be a baller. Welcome to Be a Baller, where we discuss how to build a lifelong legacy. I'm your host, Coach Tim Brown. We're blessed to have as our special guest Clay Hall, ABC Channel 6 Sports Director and host of the Emmy Award-winning show Buckeye Fever.
Before we get started, let's hear a word from our sponsor. The team at the Financial Solutions Network is proud to partner with Tim Brown and bring you this episode of Be a Baller. Our mission is to share generously of our time, talent, and financial resources to help our clients develop financial plans and wealth management strategies that allow them to live the lives they imagine, while connecting them with experiences and people that enhance their quality of life. FCA is one of those organizations by helping young men and women through the development of their personal faith. The Financial Solutions Network is an independently owned and managed wealth advisory firm based in Worthington, Ohio. We are a multi-generational professional team of advisors with a combined 83 years of experience teaching and managing financial strategies for individuals, families, businesses, and institutions. We would be honored to help you plan your financial journey. Contact us at 614-505-3025 or visit our website at tfsn.net.
Today, Clay will talk about his journey in sports reporting and the impact coaches have on the lives of their players. Clay, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Tim. I'm glad we finally got together.
Oh, yeah, this is good. I appreciate your time.
You bet.
And it's also good to see you on the other side of the mic. You know, I watch you. You're a tough interviewer. So I'm glad I'm on this side. On that side.
I used to be tougher. Now I'm a softie. I lob softballs sometimes.
You know, you're an Ohio guy, grew up in the backyard of Ohio State, Big Ten country. How did you find yourself in Mississippi, in the middle of SEC country?
Long story. My parents are from the South, and we moved here, and I was in the 10th grade. And so I got finished with high school, and I thought, Ohio State. I'm kind of a small town guy. That's why I like college towns. Okay. But Columbus was different. It's urban, it's big, it's 60,000 students. And I was like, I can't do this. So my dad had gone to Mississippi State after he returned from Korea and on the GI Bill and had graduated. And I said, I'll try it for a semester. So I went down there and fell in love with it, found myself. I was a late bloomer, but everything about it appealed to me. Just the merging of black and white, to see people to become friends and to have a synergy beyond what had happened in the South. And it was illustrated to me. And that's, as I tell people, that's my Mississippi, and not the issues they had for so many years. But the people were unbelievable. I found my niche. I started doing some media there, yearbook, newspaper, all that kind of stuff. And, and got to, as I said, my second TV job, I got to cover the SWAC and to see how the other half lives, for 12 years, to go to Alcorn, to go to Mississippi Valley, to go to Jackson State, along with Alabama and some of these other schools. But at any rate, so I started my media career. I had 2 newspaper jobs before I got into TV by accident.
Right.
I really did. But at any rate, that's part of the story.
Right. Growing up in Columbus, did you always want to be a sports reporter? Were you involved in some things at UA?
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't the best athlete. I thought I was athletic, but I wasn't an athlete because I was 5'0" 100 and nothing, but I had a little spunk about me. I was just telling a former classmate from UA, we had like an intramural thing during the week, and a lot of the football players would just play it to stay in shape.
Right.
And Rick Parfinchuk, who was a great football player at UA, I scored on him a couple times in these intramural games. I was like, I scored on Rick Parfinchuk, man. But I love basketball. I went to a lot of basketball camps. I went to Bill Hoskett's camp. so that was kind of my thing there for a while. But it's funny because he later came up to me at the Memorial Tournament and he goes, Clay, I'm Rick Parfenchuk. And I went, no, what? And he was like my size or a little bit shorter. Yeah. But you think he was the man. He was the man. One of several great players at UA. But at any rate, so that was kind of my outlet. And to be honest with you, my dad, who was in the military and was later awarded the Bronze Star, he didn't play because he farmed as a kid in Mississippi. And so his parents really never gave him any time for sports. And so he didn't see that as a great vehicle. I later convinced him, because my son's a lacrosse coach in Division I, and impressed upon him. But literally on the weekends, we would be doing chores, man. Right. And because that's what he did. And my friends would come over and go, can Clay play some hoop? Or he goes, well, he can after he's done. Maybe you boys might want to help him. And they'd be like, Mr. Hall, I'm out. I'm good. We'll check you later. Yeah. So it was a lot of, it was just a lot of, I'm the apprentice. Right. And we always had a project, whether we were planting a garden, building, it went on and on and on. And so he just never devoted the time to, hey, got to take you to practice, got to play, he just, so, and we were young, so it did, anyway, but he taught us, and my mom as well, the value of work and a work ethic. And that work ethic has carried me to this day, because I'm not going to let anybody outwork me. And when they told me at 52 years old, you got to pick up a camera, I'd never shot anything in my life. And I was like, yeah, bring it on. You're not taking my spot. I have 3 kids here, raised them, educated them. And I was like, fine, if that's what it takes. Because, Tim, really, you either do it or you move on, because they're trying to get more blood out of the turnip. They're trying, you're multitasking to the max. And so that became not an issue for me, because hard work was those weekends with EJ Hall, man. My friends used to call him Hurricane Hall. Oh, he was just shouting those orders. Let's go.
Speaking of that, what are some other life lessons you learned from Dad? You got the work ethic.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting. My parents live in South Carolina, and I was down there one time, and upstairs in an office that my brother now uses. My parents are both 91 and still living. Amen. There was this little article that my mom had framed from his hometown newspaper, and it was about him getting the Bronze Star. And I said, Dad, I didn't know anything about that. Why was that given to you? And he said, well, they were getting shelled during the day. And so to get any work done, they had to do it at night. And he built a bridge, not by himself, but built a bridge over water so they could move the troops. And they did it at night. And I was like, well, you weren't an engineer. You'd never been trained. How in the world would you know how to do that? And it's kind of like that book, I think by Tom Brokaw, The Greatest Generation. Yes. And it's just, you get it done, and then not a word was said. Nobody, that generation, they didn't talk about that stuff. Right. And so I just knew I came from good stock. Good stuff. Even if, and I can nail and I can do this and that, but nothing like that. And he just had that innate ability. And so and my mom has never met a stranger. My mom is incredible. She probably should have run for office, but she's got that sweet, syrupy Southern accent, and she just brings people in. She draws people to her. And that's kind of where I got that. She was a little bit of a writer, I think, in high school and majorette and all that stuff, but very outgoing. And my dad is completely opposite. Right. I mean, he's tough. Yeah. And he can be abrasive. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that's another thing you learn. you're not going to be handed anything. Mm-hmm. And I think because of that, when they said, pick up that camera, right. Okay, bring it on. Where is it?
Where is it?
Yeah,
Let's go to work. Let's go to work.
Yeah, let's go to work.
When you were at Mississippi State University, were you involved in covering sports?
Yeah, a little bit. In fact, one of the first jobs I had was stringing, as they used to call it, kind of freelancing for the Associated Press. Mm. So I'd go to the basketball games, take, some notes, get the scores, get the stat sheet, and then I would call it in to the Associated Press. I'd write a little something, give them some details. And I thought, wow, this is really cool. Yeah. And I later was a spotter in the football stadium for the voice of the Bulldogs, Jack Crystal, who had that gig for about 50 years. And I really thought that was the ultimate. Mm-hmm. I was like, I'm sitting up here. And, running back James Jones, receiver, you just point it out. Okay. And he has a big sheet and and he's taking my direction. Wow. And so, I got the bug, I think, from those two things that, you can actually make a career out of this. Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, your career is interesting because you began as a Montgomery advertiser. Yeah, I was there 6 months. Yeah. I had I had started at the Commercial Dispatch in Columbus, Mississippi, worked there for a little bit, went to Montgomery, and then somewhere in there, it was like 5-6 months. I really enjoyed the writing, et cetera. And I was cruising right along. I was moving to the desk where you set up the entire sports section. Mm-hmm. and starting to learn that. And this guy I had worked for in Columbus calls me. He said, Clay, you ever had any interest in TV? And I said, to be honest with you, I was like, I'm enough ham. I'll try it. Right. And so he's like, well, yeah, we'll train you a little bit and this and that, and you can write a story. And so I went back to Columbus. It was kind of like this Columbus where the TV, the radio, and the paper were owned by the same family. Okay. And so I was there a year and a half, kind of a sink or swim thing, and then moved on and eventually came here.
Mm. You were blessed covering the SEC during that time, and then I was reading where you used to have some weekly one-on-ones with the great Paul Bear Bryant. Can you talk about that experience?
Well, as somebody from Tuscaloosa, you know how he was revered. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was unbelievable. I mean, we would, we were talking earlier, they would have the print in one room and the TV guys, and you'd sit at this long table, and there might be 6, 7, 8 TV stations there, maybe more. And you get in your place in Birmingham or Tuscaloosa would kind of be up front, and me from Columbus, Mississippi, which was only about 50 miles away. Mm-hmm. So we'd get over there in an hour. And so they would start it up, and each person would have 3 questions. And I'm sitting in the back. I'm like number 9. Mm. And as they complete their interview, you move up a chair. It was kind of like, well, what's the game? What's the game with the musical chairs? Yeah. So you move up. And the other thing you're worried about is everybody's taking the good questions. What am I going to do? But that was great training because you got to think on your feet. Oh, yeah. So I would get up there and he'd go, I don't know if I know you. And Columbus, Columbus. Hey, are the lights still on over there? He knew it was a small town. Right. Oh, yeah. I said, I'm coming back every week. I'm going to meet you right here. And he had far more personality than people would realize, and so many who think he just got to grumble, I thoroughly enjoyed it. He had a big heart. And anyway, it was beyond, people that I went to school with or that I was in the business with. They were like, let me go with you. Let me go with you. Yeah. Because Bear was to the south as what Woody was to the north. Yeah. And so it was a great proving ground. Yeah. And you had to make it happen on the fly there.
You had to cross that question off. Right. Cross that one off.
What am I going to do now?
Right. You were blessed to not just had an SEC football experience, but the SWAC as well. We were talking about that earlier. Jerry Rice and some of those guys, McNair.
That was so enriching for me to see, as I tell people, how the other half lives. To go to an event and you're the only white person there, and to cover that, they were so appreciative of the coverage. It just made you love them. I mean, they would go out of their way. Thank you for coming down here. Yes. Jackson State was in our town, and then Alcorn State. Steve McNair was the quarterback, made a run at the Heisman. I followed him to New York that year. Mississippi Valley had Jerry Rice. They also had a quarterback who made him famous, and his name was Willie Satellite Totten.
Satellite Totten.
And they had a head coach, Archie the Gunslinger Cooley. And that's because he threw it kind of like Mike Leach about 50 times a game. And Willie Totten became a little bit famous too. And Jerry was in the open of our Saturday night sports show. They literally were practicing beside a cotton field in the Delta of Mississippi. And there was a old neglected, like 18-wheeler kind of trailer that was across the way. He caught a pass one time and ran into that thing and went down. He was down for a second or two, hopped back up. And so we used that in the open of our show, and it became famous statewide. And B.B. King did the open for our show. And so this thing would go dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun, and then Jerry would hit the trailer, go down, and there would be a pause. And then BB, the music would come back, and it was like, this is the coolest thing. But he recognized me 25, 30 years later when he was the Grand Marshal of the Fiesta Bowl Parade. And I took some of our staffers over there with me that morning. They were like, you don't know Jerry Rice. And we connected. His family was sitting up on the car ready to start the parade. And he said to me, Sports Journal, which was that show. And he looked at his wife and he goes, Sports Journal. He goes, Clay. And it had been forever. But that is a connection. And as I tell people, that's my Mississippi.
That's good. That's good. We're here in Ohio and, we see Big Ten football. Can you talk about playing between the hedges, what that SEC football is all about?
Well, the SEC has that SEC network has that slogan, it just means more. And people get upset with that, Big Ten people especially, because those are the kingpins now. It's the SEC, it's the Big Ten. And I think so many people, African-American athletes, they see it as such a vehicle to move themselves forward and not only the education, but the chance to play in the league. And so for some, it really is their life and it's their chance at a new life and survival and to move forward in this country. And so people, the players, the fans are so rabid, but there's nobody more rabid than Ohio State and Michigan. Because it's on such a larger scale. Like where I went to school, Mississippi State has a rivalry with Ole Miss, and we call them the school up north. And it's bitter because it's in-state. Ohio State, Michigan is different. It's your state against my state. But when you work with a guy from Ole Miss, or they literally, I've never seen such hatred. They several times when they've televised that annual game, which they call the Egg Bowl, they've come on the air and the two teams are fighting. And that literally is, Mississippi, one of Mississippi State's greatest slogans is, go to hell, Ole Miss. And so that's where that sits. They're about 80 miles apart. And anyway, so it's a little different in that sense. But now, because of the rivalry and some of the players produced, ESPN has picked up the game year after year after year. But there's not 110,000 there. True. There's 65,000. But for those people, it's life and death.
Yeah, that's big. That's big. Yeah. And then you finally, boy, it took you a while to get back here. You finally made it back home.
I did.
Made it back home.
Yeah.
Welcome home.
Thank you. I feel like I now, after 28 years here, I feel like a full-fledged Buckeye.
Yeah. Now, how'd that opportunity come about?
I started sending tapes, and that's where we used to sort of get jobs. And here's the story. So they interviewed several people, and I had sent a thing, and I had done an interview, came up here, and they were kind of slow playing it, it felt like. And I later found out that Reese Davis of ESPN was interviewing for the same job, but he had also had some interviews with ESPN. So he is down the street. We're on Riverside Drive. He's at the Wendy's eating lunch before he goes into the interview. And ESPN calls him and says, "Don't take the interview. We're going to hire you. Just tell them you're good. You got a gig, whatever." And he truly did. And he was hired by ESPN. And he said one time to me, we were at, I don't know, I can't remember what Big Ten game we were at. And he said, I never knew who got that job. And I said, "Reese, I think it was me." And he's like, "Really?" And he went into the whole story. So, thankfully that he or Herb Street or anybody else didn't get the gig.
Right.
And I was able to kind of make it my own. And as we developed these shows that surrounded the games, and because this is, back in the day, they were always on ABC.
Yes.
And we had a captive audience leading in. We had a captive audience leading out. And Tim, you never seen ratings like because a 70 share would be 70% of everybody in Columbus is watching the game. Sometimes it'd be 75, 80. And we would have at least half of that or more going in, and especially coming out where you hear from the coach, you talk to the players live, et cetera, et cetera. And that thing took off, and our station said, "We're not going to just do this once in a while. We're doing this every week," because it became lucrative for our station. And so we made that our own. And as that began to grow, it dawned on me, this is where this can be a great gig for you. Yeah. Because TV can be quite, I don't know the word for it, but not so stable. And I found stability here. And so I had 3 kids, and they were all educated. And now, so ABC 6, I will forever be grateful.
You've been blessed to be around some legendary coaches and athletes. When you think about that word legend, being a legend, what does that mean to you? Legacy.
They are larger than sport. They transcend sport. And that's some of these great coaches, players. When I think about the people I've interviewed, and it's really because of covering Ohio State football, I've gone from every corner of the United States, staffing games in these legendary stadiums. I mean, I couldn't ask for anything more. College football is my bread and butter. I love it. And I think just to be able to see all of that and to go to these great places that I maybe dreamed about as a kid, to go to, the Meadowlands. My first game, Ohio State played Miami. The Meadowlands is not there anymore. The new stadium has been built, and, Jimmy Hoffa was supposedly buried in the Meadowlands. But to see, that first team, Eddie George, Terry Glenn, Bobby Hoying, Ricky Dudley, and it just goes on. And Ohio State's been great to me. And just to be able to now call those guys friends that I used to, I'm older than all of them, but that's really cool.
Yeah, speaking of that, your broadcast journey has afforded you the opportunity to cover games in the Horseshoe, Rose Bowl, Happy Valley, Jerry's World. What makes these venues so special?
I think it's just the quality of the games. But to be in the shoe, I think because in those shows that we used to do, we would have live cameras in the stadium. And to be honest, it wasn't me they came to see. A lot of times the band was more important than the football team. So we would televise the ramp entrance, and we got it timed out every week. Yeah. It's like 2 minutes and, drive on down the field, and that majorette and drum major comes out. And literally people, you could see the spike in the ratings. And we do it like 3 cameras. You'd run, I mean, it's dramatic. Yeah. And people we would hire, they would be like, can I please go to the game? And I said, yeah, because there's nothing like it. You're standing on the field and that thing happens. Right. And it just became a huge, huge deal. And the Big Ten Network later picked up on it. Right. It stole my idea. Yeah, whatever.
Like you've been an innovator here.
Yeah, at any rate. But yeah, it's the traditions. It's the pageantry. It's all of that. Clemson runs down the hill, and there's just so much, that thing at Penn State, we went over there one time and I stole the 8-track tape. We're talking mid 90s. Right. And we did a story and I was like, I'm going to take this tape because we don't want to hear it. We don't want to hear this for 4 quarters on Saturday night. And it turned out great. But I think it is those longstanding traditions that make college football. Yeah. And it's changing and everything's changing. Everything that used to be illegal is now legal. Right. And so we're all adjusting to it.
Oh, yeah. You've also witnessed some great teams and coaches. Can you talk about the qualities of a team leader?
When you say that, I think of James Laurinaitis. I think, and you're right, the coaches set the agenda. And they're all different. And you can get it done in different ways. Jim Tressel, so vastly different from Urban Meyer, but they both got it done. Yeah. And I just think about, their own ingenuity and their own take, and how Urban Meyer is an elite. I guess he can bring a team together. But Jim Tressel did it too, and he did it in such a different way. And it's interesting how you see guys operate. Luke Fickell now becoming a top flight head coach. He didn't have a great chance here, but now at Cincinnati and now at Wisconsin. At Wisconsin, he's going to be a problem. Oh, yeah. and so for that. Advance in his career. I mean, we may see Luke back here someday. I think he's top drawer. I think he cares. I think it's just and that's why it's so interesting to study how they go about their business. Right. Ryan Day, another. I can't think of a more quality person than Ryan Day, and I think he's in it for the right reasons. Yes. And they all like the wins, and they all like the money and all of that. But Ryan has something beyond that, and that means a lot. Yeah.
You mentioned James Laurinaitis. Take us back. Take me back to that, those qualities you saw in him. Because you get to see the guys behind the scenes. We saw him hitting people, tackling, but you saw some other things.
Well, and it's sometimes it's hard because Ohio State has so many people in their media core and their media group. I mean, when Ohio State goes to an away game, the other school is just like, oh, gosh, here they come. And here's 50, 60, 70 people who travel with Ohio State. And so it's not like I can just go down the street and talk to James. Gotcha. You're restricted by the access. Right. But you just saw a kid, 3-star from Minnesota, who wanted to do more. And he said, I want to judge myself against the very best. And Tressel gave him a look because he says now, Urban would have never signed me. I'm a 3-star player. Right. So I just, in his own development, his own walk as a Christian, there's something more to James Laurinaitis And I think so much of him, and it's never about him.
Right.
And he was doing a thing I saw on social media the other day, interviewing, I think it was Steel Chambers. And he said, name your top 4 linebackers. He said, Laurinaitis. And he's in that Mount Rushmore. He just combines it all. Yes. He could think the game. He could play the game. His dad was that crazy big time wrestler. So at any rate, and now he's back where he wants to be. So, and he was willing to say, hey, because I think a lot of people are like, you play the NFL for 9 or 10 years. Do you really know what this coaching thing's about? And so he had to go to Notre Dame to prove I'm serious about this. Right. And he became a graduate assistant doing all the grunt work. And now he's back here, and he is going to be a major asset in that linebacker room.
You know, I've always admired your humility as a reporter and sports director. You've always given young guys the opportunity to shine. Can you tell young up-and-coming sports broadcasters interested in the field the intangible skills they need to build this legacy, those intangible skills?
Be selfless. Everybody in TV has an ego. I have an ego. There's no doubt about it. But you got to set that aside for the greater good. And I think if you're willing to work, and as I tell interns out there, television is, especially if you're going to be a grinder like me, and I call myself the mutt face grinder. I'm not pretty. I don't know how I've stayed on television for 20, 30 years. Excuse me, but you got to be willing, especially now, if you're willing to pick up a camera and you come to the table every day with an idea, and that idea has to turn. In other words, don't bring me an idea and you're going to do it 3 weeks from now. I have to fill the black, as we call it, and we got to cover that up. And that's what we do with the content. And so you got to come to the table with a couple of ideas that will turn that day. And then you've got to be able to work nights, holidays, and weekends. And I just want to be up front with that so kids know this is not a 9-to-5 gig. And Tim, as you know, having been, there aren't many 9-to-5 gigs anymore. You're always on call. I came back from the Rose Bowl one year, and there was very few people. We flew in. And that very night, I ended up going to a fire and doing a cut-in on my phone. Is that the kind of stuff you're willing to do in local television? And carrying that tripod out at the memorial, people are like, why are you doing that? I said, there's no glamour in local TV. Right. You got to dig in. Right. And again, be willing to work. Find some writing talent. Got to be able to type. And now you have to multitask. Yes. So you got to learn a new app every other week. So that was tough for an old man who grew up in the business on a typewriter. Kids don't even know what a typewriter, do they? I don't think they would.
What is that? What are you doing, Clay?
Yeah. The old AP machine back in the rear of the newsroom. It'd be like that movie, All the President's Men. You see the little type going across. Anyway.
As you built, let's talk about this Buckeye fever, and what makes that show so special and unique.
Well, we hire freelancers, guys who've played, and I think that people relate to them because they saw them play to great heights and achievements. And I think because Buckeye football is such a cherished entity. And to be honest with you, more people would watch when they lose the post game than when they won. True. Because they wanted to hear what happened. Right. Who's going to answer for this? Right. Who's to blame? That kind of stuff. But we've had a number of guys over the years. And like you said, we've given people a chance. And people think it's easy. But when that red light goes on, something happens in your head and you have to get it from here to here. And you find the guys who can do that. And girls too. We've had female anchors and reporters. And so it's just been a fun evolution over 28 years. And that's how people recognize me now. It's from that show.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's no doubt.
Well, Clay, this has been great. As we kind of wrap up a little bit, this is a legacy broadcast where you truly are a baller because you built a lifelong legacy. So you think about, what is the legacy of Clay Hall?
I hope I treated people fairly. Again, I always lean on hard work because that's the way it is now. I mean, the multitasking and the things that you have to pull off. I hope I told compelling stories. I hope people enjoyed our work. And I think beyond that, just finding yourself, and I became a Christian at an early age, and that has bonded me with my wife. There are so many things when I think I've been given a number of opportunities by our Heavenly Father. And that's I'm very grateful for that, and feel like that's been a huge part of my development as a person.
Yes. Yeah, well, I want to thank you for answering that call. The Lord calls, we got to answer the call, and then just using those gifts that He's given us, not for ourselves, but for others. And that's why I love your commitment to excellence and giving others the opportunity. I think about all those guys I see on the set every year, new guys, got Jay Bridges, you got all those guys coming in, you give them that opportunity to do something they love doing,
Yeah, and I think because I had that 12-year experience covering the SWAC and giving people of color a chance has meant so much to me.
Yeah. I see that Obi over on the side. He always grinning, and Demetrius Stanley. The list just goes on and on. Giving those guys that opportunity.
And D was the star of the show for 10 years.
Oh yeah. That was good. So this brings us to the end of this episode. So I want to thank our special guest, Clay Hall, for sharing his wisdom and building a lifelong legacy in sports. And I want to thank the audience for joining us during the enlightening and informed discussion on how to build a lifelong legacy. Hope this episode was beneficial to you. As always, thanks for listening to Be a Baller Podcast.
If you enjoy our show, please share this podcast with your family and friends. Be a Baller Podcast is available on all major podcast stations. Be sure to come back next week as we continue to discuss on how to build a lifelong legacy. Until then, don't forget to be a baller. This podcast was created by Coach Tim Brown. It was edited by Teron Howell and produced and recorded by the video production class of Worthington Christian High School.